Welcome to Your College Bound Kid,
a podcast for parents, college counselors, students, and anyone who wants a weekly 90-minute deep dive into the world of college admissions.
My name is Dave. I'm a parent of a daughter in college, and we live in Chicago, Illinois.
My name is Lisa. I'm a clinical psychologist and a college counselor. I am a parent of a boy in elementary school, a girl in middle school, and a girl in college. After 30 years in Chicago, we recently moved to North Carolina.
My name is Mark. I'm a college coach in Atlanta and the parent of two daughters. Karis, a graduate of Davidson College, and she is the founder of the Spanish tutoring company, SpanishHelpToday.com. And Joy is a graduate of the University of Georgia, and she is getting her master's degree at North Carolina State University.
This week in the news, the future of the campus tour, a great article by Scott Jaschik of Inside Higher Ed. Our question from a listener is, where do late bloomers go to college? Our interview is with Eric Furda, the former executive director of undergraduate admissions at Columbia University and the former dean of undergraduate admissions at the University of Pennsylvania. And we are talking about his recently released book, A College Conversation. And no college spotlight because we are bringing back Kristen Mosley for a double interview where she will have a big announcement.
And friends, I'm hoping I don't freak my friend out here, my brother from another mother. But why don't you explain what you see, Dave?
I see the inside of a bed sheet, man. It's like you're curled up in bed. It's like you're my daughter on a Saturday who don't want to get up and thinks you can continue the whole day inside a bed.
So here's the deal. I have been so frustrated that my audio quality is not what I want it to be. You listen to Lisa's and it sounds amazing. And I told her what mic to get. She gets the mic, the same mic as me. Why is she sounding so good? Why am I not? So I went on a quest to figure it out. So I was going to soundproof Joy's room, you know, with the official, formal, high-end stuff. And then that was going to be a hassle. So then I start reading all these articles. And NPR has like this audio technician. And when NPR staff travel, she tells them, get under the covers. Just make your own portable sound booth. It'll block all of the reverb. So I'm trying it out. And we'll see what my sound quality is like. So I'm under the covers, under a blanket, pitch black, trying to create my own portable sound booth.
Well, here in Chicago, we do things organically. So I'm in my little study. Soon you'll hear the birds chirping outside. You'll hear my dogs barking to get some dinner. You might hear a siren or two as the ambulances rush to some new urban emergency. And it's just
so you can relate.
That's right. But for me, it's all just part of the real atmosphere.
There we go. As long as I don't sweat to death, I'm okay.
Oh, yeah.
But I have a few announcements, and then we'll dive in with our unique admissions tip this week, and then we'll get to vernacular and the big number. So one announcement, this is your absolute last chance to sign up for the Practice ACT and SAT because this goes live on the 26th. That's on the 28th, and they'll shut it off on the 27th. So your last chance to sign up. You also get the 1-hour webinar with Jeb Apparuth on September 8th, 8:30 to 9:30. That automatically comes with signing up and the score report. In order to do that, just go to yourcollegeboundkid.com, click the resources tab, and you'll see the bottom thing and take it from there. Next thing I want to announce, and this is a big favor I'm going to ask of everyone. So, you know, those of you who are regular listeners know a few years ago, we had a survey of our listeners, and it was transformational. I cannot tell you how many things we changed because of the results from that survey. But that survey was September of 2019, so it's been a while. And the other thing with that survey is I send the results to every single interviewee that we have, and they find it amazingly helpful because the information in there are things like, what states do most of your listeners come from? What's the average age? What's the gender breakdown? What's their educational breakdown? What's their racial breakdown? What's the average income? All of that's in there, not to mention other things as well. And so it's extremely helpful for our interviewees to know who they're talking to. And also, we ask you things in there like, what topics would you like for us to cover more? Who would you like us to bring on for interviews? So we'll shape our programming based on that response. And I know everybody knows the wind up. You know it's coming. We're got another survey up, and we're going to ask you to contribute to it. It's going to take you between 10 to 15 minutes, depending on how much you write. But you'll be giving such a gift to us because you'll help us with our programming and you'll help our interviewees know who they're speaking to. So all you do, you're getting used to this by now, yourcosmonkid.com. And then under the resources tab, you'll see a link that says listener survey. Just click it out, give you your honest opinion. You're not obligated to answer a question you're uncomfortable with, but you'll be helping us to help everybody out. So really, really appreciate it.
Hey, and I really want to give a shout out to your daughter, Karis. She did a wonderful job in this off year of helping my daughter learn Spanish. And just to give you some context, during this year, Lauren had never taken a lick of Spanish, and she signed up for Karis's tutoring. And not only did they have an incredible bond, but by the end, these guys were just literally conversing fluently in Spanish. So Lauren took her Yale placement tests, and she placed in, there are 5 categories. There is elementary 1 and 2, intermediate 1 or 2, and then advanced. And she placed into intermediate 2, which is just below advanced. And that is all due to the efforts and the teaching of your daughter, Karis. So shout out to Lauren for that accomplishment. Shout out to Karis for that wonderful experience. And I just want to really pump anybody who's interested in learning Spanish. I can attest that there's no better teacher than your daughter.
Dave, that's really kind of you. And Karis is very talented. I see her in action. She's a much better teacher than I am. But I also have to say, I think you're really not giving Lauren enough credit because, I mean, Karis would frequently say, Lauren is smart as a whip, super dedicated, and just a joy. And it kind of shows what you can do if you have a really eager, dedicated, attentive student and a really dynamic, talented teacher. I mean, you really can go far with that combination.
Right. And that's why Karis will never be teaching me, because the comparison would not be favorable.
Don't think Dave's joking. He's jealous of his own daughter's intellectual prowess. He doesn't want to look bad in front of Karis, in front of a 25-year-old.
Exactly. She'd be, I got to turn off this video so he can't see me rolling my eyes.
Well, you know what? You know what she does say?
Yeah.
That when she teaches, adult learners in their 40s and 50s, they're just not as sort of sharp in general as students. Like students that have just been in the habit of school. It's just a different responsiveness that adult learners have compared to students who are in their prime. So her expectations would already be low, man. That's what I'm trying to say.
Well, once again, what a wonderful experience Lauren had, and what a wonderful teacher your daughter was. So truly a year well spent.
All right, Dave. So for normally I do the admissions tip right now.
Yes.
But Lisa and I were having this conversation. I thought she said something really profound. And I said, would you be willing to let me record and you do that as the admissions tip? She said, sure. So I recorded that. So the next thing you'll hear is Lisa with the admissions tip this week. Okay, friends, you know I like to do creative things. Lisa and I were having a conversation off air about something she did, and I thought, that is brilliant, and can we make that our admissions tip? And she said, sure. And then I said, can we record you? And she said, sure. So Lisa, take it away.
Well, it might be brilliant and it might be awful. I'll let the listeners decide. But my daughter, Lily, is very smart, but kind of unmotivated at times. And I knew that if she took a lot of ACT practice tests, her score would improve. And we worked it out that I paid her $25 a test to take them. And she made a lot of money that she used to buy clothes and not other such things that I would have to buy her anyway. But I saved a lot of money because that score went up by like 7 or 8 points, and she was able to get merit aid at almost every place that we applied.
And this is the ACT. So when you're talking about 7 or 8 points, that's a lot.
Yeah.
It's a
Yeah.
big difference between being like in the mid-20s to like the low to mid-30s.
Right. Exactly. So maybe it's good parenting, maybe it's bad parenting, but I figured that's what worked for us. It is a big ask to ask a kid to spend 3 or 4 hours every weekend doing a practice test when they'd rather be with their friends. And she felt I needed to make it worth her while. So I did.
Well, I did something for Joy I didn't do for Karis. I said, if you get a 4.0, no, I should actually said 3.8. If you get a 3.8 or higher, you get $400 a month for spending in college. If you get a 3.6, I did. It was 300. And if you get a 3.5, it's 200.
Oh, I'm doing this.
Oh, do you know Joy finished her last 3 semesters at UGA 404040?
Oh, I bet because she wanted the bonus, right?
Yes, and she's also competitive. And she's like, I know I'm supposed to be motivated just for the love of school, but I'm telling you that money really was, when I could like hang out with my friends or study, and I was thinking about that money. So I did my own version of that, and I was happy to pay the 400 rather than the 200 or the 300. Or I told her if it was under 3.5, you get 0. Mm-hmm. And so I kind of did my own version. So maybe we're both bad parents.
Or brilliant parents. It
Yes.
just depends on how you think about it.
So that's our admissions tip for the week is figure out what you need to do to push your child's buttons to get them to do the things that they might not do without a little incentive. And don't be afraid of using money.
That's right. I would say the world would be a better place if we just incentivize people to do the right thing. So many times we're incentivizing them to do the wrong thing. And if we incentivize people to do the right thing, then they would all do the right thing. But it just doesn't seem to happen that way.
Lisa, guess what? I'm recruiting you for more admissions tips. This was good. So get used to it.
Okay,
Next time you say something that's brilliant, I'm saying, time to record, Lisa. Let's hit the record button.
Y'all might have to wait a while, but I'll do my best.
Awesome. All right, Dave, you ready for admissions vernacular?
Let's do it, man. I've been sort of spotty, but I'm feeling good this morning. I got my caffeine, I got my coffee, I got my Alex Trebek hat on. Let's knock it off the park.
Now he's going to Lucky Charms.
That's right.
Next thing you know, you're going to tell me you got your Lucky Charms cereal all lined up. That's going to be the next thing.
I'll try to
hear from you. All right. So now I'm going to give you a warning on this one. This, and people are going to think I'm heartless, this is actually a really hard one. However, this one may be one where you can use your deduction skills by the name to get it right.
Awesome.
So it's one that you may be able to figure out by the name, but it's not a term that's commonly used. The term is squeakers. What is a squeaker? Want to take a guess?
Well, squeaker used to occur to something just made it under the radar, just basically made the cut. Like you just squeaked by. So I'm going to guess it's a kid or a student or a prospect who just barely made the admissions criteria. Could have gone either way, but the wind blew favorably in his direction and he landed in the admission pile. He or she.
Winner, chicken dinner. You're on a new streak, my friend. You nailed it. I don't even have to. Everything you said was right. I'm not even stretching it. So let's give an example. Let's give an example of this. So let's say you're a school. Let's say the typical average kid, your average freshman GPA is like a 3.6. So typically a student that's got like 3 A's and 2 B's. Say your average test scores are like 26 ACT and like a 1280 SAT. And you're getting down to the end of your admissions season and you realize something. We don't have a single male from Arkansas. And so you look at all your applicants and you're like, well, this is our strongest one. He's a straight B student. And someone's like, come on, we can't take this student with a straight B. We just turned down this kid that I really liked, and this kid had like a 3.5. And then the admission area representative for Arkansas says, I'm going to get killed. I'm going to get filleted if we don't have any kids from Arkansas in our applicant pool, in the freshman class. Because we put it right out there in our profile. We have students from 45 states, and I travel in Arkansas. And every year, some of those counselors ask me, who do you have from Arkansas? And so that argument carries the day. Dean of Admissions says, let's go ahead and take Johnny in. So Johnny got in with a 3.0 and a 22 ACT, and he leapt over lots of other people. He would be what we call a squeaker. Good job, Dave.
Thank you. Hey, and I got another analogy. I was in the flower shop and I was looking at these beautiful bouquet of flowers, and the guy was saying, yes, this is really tough because we have like plenty of daisies, but not enough pansies, and you need enough pansies to actually make it look as pretty. And I realized that's a great analogy that, you might be the prettiest daisy in the field, but if they already have too many daisies and they need a pansy just to make it just right, you got to just start looking for those pansies.
I think that one might have passed the Nika test. Might have. Not bad, my friend.
That's right. So the analogy is, sometimes you got to be a pansy and not a daisy to make the cut for the bouquet, the florist. There you go.
Absolutely. Yep, my favorite one you ever came with was that skinny bikini one, but that was your top. That was like your best of the best. All right, the big number, and it is a big one. It is $5.8 billion, and it is hot news that just broke yesterday.
5 point.
The Department of Education has agreed to forgive $5.8 billion in student debt. Now, this is the interesting thing. We've had this debate. You've got people like Elizabeth Warren that are trying to get $60,000 per student abrogated, abolished, annulled, wiped off their record. And so far, Biden has not gone along with that. However, what they did agree to do is wipe out this $5.8 billion. Now, who are these people that are getting the $5.8 billion? There are 300,000 people who are disabled.
Okay, that makes sense.
So they agreed to do student loan erasing for 300,000 people, total of $5.8 billion. So that's our big number of the day, $5.8 billion. Take that article away, Dave.
Let's turn to college hot topics in the news.
All right. Well, this is funny because you had sent me an article and I was reading it and I was like, boy, I have such a sense of deja vu. At 3:00 in the morning, you say, oh, I sent you the article we did a year ago.
Yeah, let's tell our listeners. I want you to see how good of a friend, how good of a sport Dave is. So there was an article that Scott Jaschik from Inside Higher Ed did last year. Do you remember the exact word, Dave? The something of the campus tour?
I think it was, oh, wow, now get me, I'm not sure, but it was like the end of the campus tour, and now it's the future of the campus tour. Yeah, it was just one
word different, but there's a lesson in there. Pay attention to detail.
Yeah.
So the other article was one that we did a year ago, and it was dated August 2020, and the content in it was really dated. This one's hot off the press.
That's
so
right.
Yeah, I caught it at like 3:30 in the morning, and I sent it to Dave, and I was like, Dave, please forgive me, my friend, but I sent you the wrong article. And being a good trooper, he just immersed himself in it. Here we are today.
All right. Well, it's deja vu all over again, according to the great guru Yogi Berra. This is The Future of the Campus Tour by Scott Jaschik, Inside Higher Ed. In this article, they says campus tours are smaller than they used to be and mostly outside, but many fear the Delta variant could change things for the worse. So what Scott says here is that campus tours are back, but they are smaller and more personalized, and they frequently require pre-registration and a health assessment. So he gave a variety of examples from Holy Cross to University of Rochester to Baylor. We'll talk about them. He said in Holy Cross, before the pandemic, they were offering tours up to 4 times a day, and they often had 100 people per tour. Then the pandemic hit, and lickety-split just like that. They canceled all the tours early last year, and they did not have any further tours until this last April. Now they do have tours, but first they started only for students who had been accepted and their family members. Now they're having tours every day, but each tour is limited to 3 potential students and their families. They have a maximum of 20 people per tour, down from 100, and pre-registration is required. The tours leave on the hour, and with more tours and fewer people, Holy Cross is assuming both that these are going to meet their higher stringent health requirements, and it also means that the tours tend to be more personalized. And they've been so pleased with these new tour formats that they've hinted that they may keep these formats even after the pandemic is over. That's similar with University of Rochester, that it decided to resume very small 1-hour tours of the campus this summer. They actually are only taking reservations, but 1 month in advance, because they want to be cognizant of the fact that with Delta, things can change at any moment. And then they talked about Baylor, that they have private tours only for family members, and they basically said this month that they will resume tours with 12 people at most at a time. And they said that students on these personalized campus tours tend to be more highly qualified, and they're receiving a much more personalized tour, which includes a free drink at the on-campus coffee shop and a coupon for a free cupcake. And what Baylor is finding, that these personalized tours tends to lead to a better conversion rate than the traditional tours. So that's a quickie overview, Mark. Why don't I give it up to you and see what else you'd like to add about the new campus, smaller, personalized, customized, cupcake-oriented tours.
Well, Dave, that was a great summary. It would have been a great summary if you had a week to prep. You did that in 4 hours of notification. Good stuff. So the first thing I want to say is COVID is really humbling when you're a college counselor. So some of you may remember, I attended a webinar late May, and it was a number of directors of admission in the Midwest. And every one of them said, we haven't announced this publicly yet, but let me tell you the dates that we're going live. One was like June 7th, another one was June 22nd, another one was early July, another one was late July. And I came on and I announced it. Guess what? Everything's opening up. We're back. And, I'm always learning stuff from my students and my families. Starting in June and then toward July, I started getting story after story from my students, whether my school-based students at KIPP or my private clients. And they started saying, this school's not doing a live tour, or they're completely full. And I tried to sign up weeks in advance. And so I realized pretty quickly the rules have changed once again. And worse than a roller coaster at Universal or Six Flags, that's what it feels like keeping up with what's going on with these tours. And this article examines how the pendulum's changed. And like Dave said, does take a look at policies at half a dozen universities. Dave mentioned College of Holy Cross, Rochester, Baylor, also Duquesne in Pittsburgh, WashU in St. Louis, and South Carolina, Coastal Carolina. So it looks at all 6 of these schools, and it looks at their various policies. And one thing that is for certain, though, which is you're not going to see it be abandoned. It is here to stay. And as Dave said, Baylor showed ample evidence that their conversion rate for people that toured, as well as the conversion rate from visitors to applicants, and then their yield was so much higher. And that's something everybody knows. So one way or another, they're going to find a way of doing tours. But here's the thing. It still may change again. So here's a quote from Drew Carter of Holy Cross. He said, "We've had 3 meetings this week about Delta and how Holy Cross should respond. So the only thing you can expect is more change." And then he says, "A month ago, we were thinking this is going to be great. And then Delta appeared." So what are some of the changes that you're seeing? Well, let me just talk about some of them. A move toward more outside changes. A move toward more outside tours, smaller groups. Like Dave mentioned, Holy Cross used to have as many as 100 on a tour when you count family members. Now they're taking 3 families. Shorter tours, more frequent but shorter. And even there have been some changes. So Holy Cross, for a while, they were doing them literally every 20 minutes. Admitted student visit days in the spring, They were only letting admitted students tour, and they were doing them every 20 minutes. Now they're doing them every hour. Other changes are happening as well. Dave talked about the cupcake and some of the freebies. Pre-registration being required. In some cases, requiring a health check, a COVID test. And everybody's agreeing that they're continuing to expand their virtual options. Now, University of Rochester officials resumed their small 1-hour tours requiring masks, but not everybody's requiring masks. South Carolina Coastal's not requiring masks. So the policies are literally all over the place. And then at Rochester, they're only taking reservations for tours 1 month in advance. So I was hearing this from my family. It's like, I'm planning a big trip in the spring. I'm planning a big trip, and it won't let me do it. And so that's a new thing. And it kind of makes sense because basically what they're saying is COVID is so unpredictable. We have no idea what changes may be ensuing. So rather than schedule tours 6 or 8 months out and then have the whole thing go down like a deck of cards, some of them are moving in that direction. Now, what I thought was really fascinating is something that came from Duquesne, from Anthony Kappa, their director of enrollment management. And he describes himself as a total traditionalist. He's all about the normal tour. It's amazing. I love it. He came into this with no plans to make any changes. And here's a quote from him. People have shorter attention spans now because of online. So the university has divided its materials into 15-minute segments. Now they are applying that idea to the in-person visit, making their remarks short and then following them with the campus tour. So some people are literally saying people's attention span is decreased through the online experience, and they're noticing that's also impacting tours, so we're going shorter. And so, it's just a wild world out there, Dave, where the only thing that's, they say the only thing is certain is like, what, death and taxes?
Yes, they do.
It feels like the only thing that's certain is that the policies related to campus tours are going to probably be different 6 months from what they are now.
Yes.
So what do you think, should be our takeaways for our listeners?
Well, a couple things. One thing I thought was sort of hinted at the article, and Baylor pointed this out, is that there is a symmetry. There is a linking of the virtual tour with the private tour. And that Baylor is still having these big open virtual tours, but it's like a funnel, so that the virtual tour can cater to people who are just a casual prospect, and that gives them an introduction. And then as they get further along in the process, then they have a more private, more in-depth personal tour. So I think the virtual and the private can work very nicely here to complement the experiences and sort of go from the broad audience much more now to the much more serious prospect. So I think that it can work very well. And then also, flexibility and the ability to adapt, change, adjust is going to be something that we're going to have to take in all of our society. And the universities are learning to be more nimble. And what's really happened is they've expanded the variety of ways that they can market themselves, and they can give the information to the public at large to adapt to changing circumstance and situations. And that's called innovation, and I think that's cool.
Yeah, no, I would agree. In fact, one of the quotes that came out here from the article, they interviewed an expert at Platform Q. Of course, Courtney Minden talked to us about Platform Q in my interview with her. And they basically said that there are two completely different audiences out there now, and you have to appeal to both of them. So there is a person that's not comfortable visiting, either because of COVID, or in some cases they have, financial constraints, but they're just not comfortable, or they're not able to visit. And that's a hugely important audience. And so you've got to go full-blown virtual. Then there's another audience that's like just chomping at the bit to get out. They've been locked in. They wanted to do these tours last year. They put them off. And you better provide for them because, I'll share the exact stat from Baylor because I have it here. So this is Van Dyke at Baylor. He said, while fewer high school seniors visited Baylor in 2020 than in 2019 because of COVID, the application rate among visitors increased by 23%. So 23% more people that visited converted to apps. And then the rate at which Baylor visitors enrolled more than double. Now, nothing will get an admission officer's attention more than seeing your conversion rate from visitors to applications going up by over 20% and seeing your yield more than double.
Yes.
And that's why some are actually speculating that this may not be a temporary change. This is, I'll read the exact quote here. Now, this is coming from Holy Cross, and it says, the college may even keep the new format after the pandemic is over, because he goes on to say that people can hear better in a smaller group and it's more personal. And to tell you the truth, that makes a lot of sense to me, Dave, because I've been on these college tours with 100 people. Now, what I do is I race right to the front, because when you're in the middle, you don't hear anything. And what happens is people are talking. I'm talking about the adults, because people don't go by themselves, right? It's like maybe a mom and dad and a kid. And who knows, Aunt Becky may be on the trip. You never know. Grandpa Jones and Grandma Jenna. So there's like these sidebar conversations going on, and it's very, very difficult to hear what's going on. It's like one big, massive group. It's not really that effective. Now, not every school does that, but it is very common. And so when I think about schools that were doing that, going to 3 people at most, or even one-on-one, and giving more of a customized experience, hey, let's stop off and get the cappuccino here and get you your ice cream and maybe a little gift card to go to the store, a little 25% off. I can see why that would be something that schools would stick with.
Well, I got to admit that I was one of the parents who really didn't like most of the tours per se. I always liked wandering on my own and just sort of exploring the nooks and crannies. And I had also a short attention span. So halfway through the tour, I'd drift towards the back with all the other reprobate parents.
You were one of the talkers.
We were one of the talkers. We'd be on our phone. We'd be chatting up, talking about the sports. And meanwhile, my wife and daughter would be like at the very front paying rapt attention. And my wife would be giving me these dirty glances. Pay attention. And I was like, okay.
So, you gave me an interesting flashback there. So I haven't been doing this with the pandemic, but my school-based job, I'll often arrange for colleges to tour us, and I'll arrange big tours, and sometimes we even stay overnight in the dorms. I mean, we take these big campus trips all over the southeastern part of the country. And I invariably have the big speech that I give everybody about being on the tour. Eye contact, rapt attention, no phone usage, no sidebar conversations. And I'm pretty firm. I remember the last time I took 15 students to Emory, and they're all high achievers. So the group had been pre-screened, and then I gave this big speech, and I was, I was pretty passionate. And invariably, you know who the violators of my policy are, Dave? The parents.
That's right. We're the worst.
So the last few times, I felt bad, but it didn't stop me from doing it. I was equally as forceful in my admonition to parents as I was to students.
Yes.
And one time I even said, and parents, you've been the worst culprits on my last tour. So I'm speaking to you as well. I hate to feel like I'm treating a 45-year-old like they're 14, but it is what it is.
It is.
You would have been that person I'd have been calling out.
I would have.
I think we've covered most of the things. I think the other thing I really want to emphasize is, because everything is changing so much, you have to frequently visit the website.
Yes.
That's where you're going to get the most up-to-date information. And don't think like, okay, I think I've got it down now. I need to sign up a month in advance. There's only going to be 3 in the group. Because even in these 6 schools, all 6 of them had different policies. South Carolina Coastal did not have a prohibition or a requirement for masks. Rochester did. We never talked about Wash U, but they've come up with a big 3-hour sort of experience, and they said they'll have 2,500 visitors within 1 month, which is no different than the numbers they had previously. So they've come up with something custom. So everybody's different, and check the website frequently. But it's a new world, it's a new game, and there's been a lot of disruptive things in society, like the internet. And we've talked already about a lot of ways in which how COVID has been a disruptor. It's been a disruptor on school travel. It's been a disruptor on visiting and online. and the growth of, the surge in online and the surge in virtual visits. And now it has a possible potential to not just temporarily upend the traditional tour, but maybe change it, maybe make it better. So stay tuned.
Awesome. Good job.
Friends, Dave and I recorded this on August 20th. And as soon as we ended our recording, I said to myself, oh, snap. Lisa and I are touring colleges in the Research Triangle in 3.5 weeks, and we haven't even nailed down our times yet. With all these changes with tours, we better book them now. So I reached out to Lisa immediately. She confirmed she was free 2 days back-to-back all day. So then I reached out and started booking visits ASAP. Initially, I had a lot of success. I got us a 9 a.m. meeting with an admission officer at Meredith College, followed by a 90-minute tour. So we're good, and we'll talk to students, in between. And then at 2:30, I was able to get us a tour at NC State, although they were not doing the info sessions, which due to COVID, which was really disappointing because I love my info sessions. But then I tried to get us tours at North Carolina Central and Durham, and they could not have been clearer. All tours, all info sessions are on hold for the foreseeable future. So you're just seeing the range of different responses that are out there and how individualized they are. I then said, well, Lisa and I visited Duke in April, but let's go back again and resume and interact with more students. So I reached out to Duke. What did they say? No tours, no info sessions now, but we hope to have them in September, so check back. UNC Chapel Hill's 8 miles away. Looked over there, pretty much the exact same response. We expect to be up and running in September, get on our mailing list, check back. So these 5 schools, you can see how the policies are all over the place. Now, what do I do in a situation like this? I work through people I know. I network. So I'll reach out to students I know at Duke and Chapel Hill, and we'll do an end around. You have to be creative these days. So tap into your network, find out who you know that's on a campus, meet them, ask them to tour you. And that's the best way to do your visits in the age of COVID.
It's time for a question from one of our listeners. Okay, Lisa, last week we started by doing this countdown of endowment per student, looking at the 100 schools with the largest endowment per student. And I'm not going to explain it again this time, but you can go back and listen if you didn't hear last week's what exactly that is. But think of it as schools that have more money so they can invest more resources in educating your child, whether that's scholarships or faculty or everything, study abroad, programs, lower student teacher faculty ratios, a number of things. I'll say this really quickly before I do this. I have a new family that I'm working with, and the dad comes from this background of knowing this stuff upside down, inside out. And so one of the most important things, to him in my parent questionnaire was, I want to see a really strong endowment per student for any private school, because he knows, the difference it can make in terms of having the resources to spend on a kid. So we're doing 89 to 80 today. So in number 89, we have Occidental College, Los Angeles, 212,000. Now we're over 200 per kid. Number 88, another school we did a spotlight on. We've done Occidental, done very recently. Lehigh, Bethlehem, PA, also 212,000 at 88. Number 87, another women's college, Hollins University in Roanoke, and they have 213,000 per kid. In 86th place, Case Western Reserve in Cleveland. Another school we've done a spotlight on, 213,000. And in 85th place, another one we've done a spotlight on, Union College in Schenectady, 214,000. Now 217,000, Kenyon College, Gambier, Ohio. And then at 83rd, we have St. John's College. You're like, didn't you just have St. John's College last week? There's another St. John's College. They're both part of the Great Books program. The other one was Annapolis. The other one was Santa Fe, New Mexico. This is Annapolis. So they come in 83rd at 219,000 per kid. And then we have Bucknell University, 82nd, and you'll be hearing an interview that I have coming up with their VP of enrollment not too long from now. They come in 82nd at 223,000. And then at 81st, University of the South, oftentimes called just Sewanee, one of the most beautiful campuses you'll see, 226,000. And then the last one for today, number 80, Centenary
in Louisiana, and that's in Shreveport at $227,000. Any more complex financial questions for me this week, Lisa?
You can always expect one from me. I mean, here's just something I'm thinking.
Sure.
So they've got this money per student, but how do we know they're spending it on the students? Is there any measure of how much money a school spends per year on student activities or, things like that, enrichment?
Yeah, you can get a hold of their budget and that stuff's published. And if you really want to get in the weeds, one of the things you'll find pretty consistently is that faculty, administration, and staff salaries and benefits is the biggest line item in any school's budget, and it's normally around 70%. And that's usually pretty consistent. Right? You take all your faculty, all your staff, all your administration, and then you add up all the benefits, and that's huge. So it's usually going in human resources, but still, you will find a wide variety. One of the things that I learned, I did a year of fundraising before I transitioned to boarding school admissions, is when you look at a budget, you will see a reflection of a school's priorities.
Mm-hmm.
So you will see wild swings, right? Wild swings in schools' priorities when it comes to how much money do they give for financial aid? Are they giving it for merit-based? Are they giving it for need-based? Are they doing both? How much are they paying their faculty? And then just other types of things too, you can see it. Does a school invest heavily in things like their facilities? Do they invest heavily in things like their career centers? There are individual decisions that are made. And so it's a really good idea if you really want to know is to get your hands on that annual report and look at that budget and really break it down and really compare.
All right.
Awesome. All right, Lisa, we have almost the opposite question from last week.
Exactly.
And that's kind of great, right? So take it away. I'm excited to answer this one.
Okay. Well, this question comes from Christina, who is a mom from Minnesota. And she asks, where do late bloomers go to college? When I read about college admissions and listen to your podcast, the featured examples are usually solid high school students with good GPAs and test scores. What about those amazing kids who bloom later and perhaps don't show as well in high school?
Yeah. And as soon as I got this question, I reached out to Lisa. I said, Lisa, we need to not only answer this, I want to see if we can get this bumped up as soon as we can. I've made some promises to people, which I'm going to stop making, by the way. Sometimes when listeners send in, I'll be like, you'll be on episode 184. And then I was like, oh, we get something like this that feels like it's got some urgency. And so now I'm telling people you'll be somewhere in the 190s, just kind of give me a little grace when we respond. But I really felt this question was really important. And I'll tell you why. I try to always be completely transparent with our listeners. I was a little conscious of this, that part of me wondered, are we speaking too much to assuming that the listeners are, not necessarily top of the class, but well above average, as a listener. And we've tried to address this concern through the spotlights. We're very intentional about having 4 out of every 5 of our spotlights be on colleges that the majority of students can get in. And so that's really the main reason we even started the spotlights, was to highlight schools beyond 20 or 30 schools. However, we do get a lot of requests for those MITs and those Stanfords and those UPenns and those Northwesterns. So we don't completely neglect them because we want to deliver what our listeners want. But one thing that has influenced the decision has been just my interaction. I know I've interacted with well over 100 listeners where the conversation of their kids' grades has come up. And sometimes it's just me interacting with people on email. Sometimes it's people I've personally worked with that listen. And the sense that I have is that the majority of our listeners, their kids do well in school. And in a lot of ways, that shouldn't be surprising, because when you think of all the things you can do, if you're listening to a 90-minute deep dive, sometimes 2 hours on the college admission process with all of the 500,000+ podcasts out there, that's a certain kind of parent. And it's that same parent that sets a certain type of academic environment and atmosphere for their child. Usually that's a parent that's going to pick very good schools for their child to be in whenever to the best of their ability. That's going to be a priority to them, whether it's the best public schools they can afford to live in the school district or it's private. It's usually a parent that's going to do, tutoring if they need to, summer enrichment, oftentimes readers. And I know from our survey that we did about a year and a half ago, almost 2 years ago now, we need to do a new one, by the way, and see if our listeners have changed. But that survey showed that more than half of our listeners have an advanced degree. And so the sense that I have very clearly is that majority of our listeners' kids are above average students. And so that has probably tainted the coverage a little bit. But we all know this, that kids are very different. I mean, I know how many times have I worked with two kids in the same family, and one has been, that really, really high achieving student, and the other one has not been. It happens a lot. And so we know that we have a range of schools and a range of students out there. So this question to me was really a priority because I think it's an area that we have been remiss. And I think we can do a better job at speaking more to the average student. So I was very, very happy to take it on and have a lot of thoughts. But I want to see if you have anything you want to say so far, Lisa.
Oh, no, I thought it was a really great question. And I think something that probably crosses the mind of a lot of listeners. And, the fact is that there are so many wonderful schools that would be more than happy to have, an average student and will provide them with a great education. So in that sense, if you can just hold on to that idea, it takes so much of the pressure of adolescence off you and off your kid. And so I think that, maybe we just need to do a better job of highlighting that, driving that point home.
So Lisa, I completely agree. In fact, one thing that is really consistent is the acceptance rate across all colleges is consistently between 65 and 68%, usually 66 or 67. In fact, I think the very first time we did our big number, I think it was our first time, either first or second, our big number was 67. And then Dave and I sang that Meatloaf song. You remember that? 2 out of 3 ain't bad. And then we said,
yeah, sadly I do.
I know. You're taking up for Anika. No, we're singing. Oh my goodness. And then we said, I want you, I need you. And that's what the colleges are saying. We want you, we need you, because 2 out of 3 times across the country, your chances of getting in are 67%. And here's just to give you a sampling of some of the acceptance rates in some of the larger schools. Auburn, 81%. Arizona State, 83%. Arizona, 79%. Then we go down and we have University of Colorado Boulder, 77%. Indiana Bloomington campus, 79%. Iowa, 84%. Kansas State, 94%. Kansas, 93%. Kentucky, 91%. LSU, 76%. Maine, 90%. Then we go down to University of Mississippi, 78. Missouri Columbia, 75. Montana State, 83. Montana, 92. Nebraska Lincoln, 75. And it just goes on and on and on and on and on. Those are just some samplings of some schools. Oklahoma State, 75. Oklahoma, Norman Campus, 71. Oregon State, 77. Oregon, 78. I think we get the point. I mean, I could keep going to make my point. Tennessee, Knoxville, 77. I'll just throw a few more out there and we'll call it a day. West Virginia, 76. University of Wyoming, 95. So those are large schools, but those are well-known schools, in many cases, flagship schools. Well, you say, well, what about smaller schools? Well, we highlighted a book maybe about a month or so called Colleges That Change Lives. And one of the reasons why that book became so popular and became a whole movement, it started in 96, and now it's literally a group of schools that travel together, and is because it highlighted these transformational schools that produce a tremendous amount of personal growth, but are very attainable for the average student. And that focuses on a lot of small schools. It's worth getting that if you like small schools. But I want to just share something for Christina to help her, because I want to give people tools. Whether you're working with a counselor or not, I'm going to give you a tool that can be very, very helpful for people just to kind of go through this process. And it's the website College Navigator. So when you go to the College Navigator website, and you can just look up College Navigator. It's actually it's a government website, so it's very well resourced. And when you go there, it gives you an opportunity to do a search. And you can click advanced search, and it brings in a few more search features. And so if you go through, and you know what I'm going to do? I'll tell you what, I'm actually going to do this. I'm going to actually go through and do this exercise. And what we're going to do is we're going to use Minnesota as our state. So you go through with College Navigator, just go to College Navigator, pull it up, and you'll see an opportunity that says use a map. And because Christina's in Minnesota, I'm going to click Minnesota, and I'm also going to click Wisconsin because Minnesota has reciprocity with Wisconsin. So you can go back and forth and get the in-state tuition rate. So we'll look there, and we're going to click, we're going to click the more search options feature, and then we're going to go through here, and it gives you a chance to put in SAT scores and ACT scores. So the average SAT in 2020 was 1051. The average ACT is usually right around 21. In the case of Christina, she could use her own child's scores, but I'll just put in schools that have a range. I'm going to use the ACT. We're going to put in a range between an 18 and a 24. So 21 being the midpoint. By the way, in my Game Changer College Admissions video series, I took people through a whole 30-minute video series of this. So this is bringing back memories. I did this in 2014. So we'll put test scores in. We'll put a range between 18 and 24. I'm not sure whether she likes larger schools or smaller schools, but it gives you an opportunity to put in the number of students that you want in the student body. And so I'm going to say, should I do larger schools or smaller schools? What do you think? Elisa, your call.
Well, I think you talked about some of the larger schools. So let's hear about some smaller schools.
Okay. All right. So we'll do schools that have under 10,000. Okay. In fact, let's not make them too small. So let's make them 2,000 to 10,000. We'll go schools with 2,000 to 10,000. Now, in order to identify average students, you don't want the acceptance rate to be too high. So we're going to say that the acceptance rate has to be at least 70% minimum. At least 70% of people are getting in. So we have average test scores. We have a 70% or high acceptance rate. We targeted a couple states, and we have a certain size. And then I'm going to go ahead and hit presto. And when we do, we have about 20 schools, 17 exactly. So I'm just going to read them really quickly. You have Bethel University in St. Paul. You have Carroll University. And I'm going to mess this up. You might know, you're Midwestern. Waukesha?
Waukesha.
Yep, thank you. I needed that Midwestern roots on me there.
Waukesha, Wisconsin.
I know this next one because it's in the news. Kenosha. Carthage College in Kenosha. We have Concordia University, and I might need your help again. Mequon, Wisconsin.
I don't
know that one.
Mequon, I think.
This is Mequon, maybe Mequon.
Sorry, people in Wisconsin. I'm sorry. I moved south and I'm just forgetting everything.
Well, you have an excuse. Illinois is not considered the upper Midwest, right? Like Wisconsin, Minnesota? Or is
not so much, no.
That's your excuse. Then we have St. Norbert in De Pere, Wisconsin. We have St. Catherine in St. Paul. We have the College of St. Scholastica in Duluth. We have University of Minnesota, Duluth. We have University of St. Thomas, St. Paul's. And then we have University of Wisconsin, Green Bay. We have University of Wisconsin La Crosse. Now, I know the last six because I've had students at all of them. University of Wisconsin Platteville. We have University of Wisconsin River Falls, University of Wisconsin Stevens Point, University of Wisconsin Stout. And then the last one we have, two more, University of Wisconsin Superior and Winona State in Winona, Minnesota. So that was just a simple search, only 2 states. Schools had to accept at least 70%. And we only looked at 2,000 to 10,000. If we made it bigger, it would be a whole lot more. But I thought it would be actually a good way to sort of show how many schools are out there for the average kid rather than just tell you there's a lot of schools for the average kid. I'd rather kind of try to show you than tell you. And this is not any private, confidential website. This is something everybody has access to, just like I do.
Right. No, I think it's such a good thing to bring up. And I've been to a lot of the schools, both on the flagships side and the small side, and they're fantastic schools. I mean, if you cannot get a good education at any of these schools, it's probably your own fault. And, they offer a tremendous amount of opportunities. And I think we all have to keep in mind that selectivity doesn't really have a direct correlation with educational and experiential quality of a school. So all of, so many of these schools have great opportunities. It's more about picking which one fits your interests and your personality. But there's so many opportunities for your late bloomers.
Yeah. And a lot of these schools, they have specialized majors or programs that have become features, and they have exceptionally strong programs in a given area, and so it may not have the overall high selectivity rate, but it might have an incredible program in journalism or in neuroscience or whatever it is that you're interested in. And so we need to talk about this more because, most kids are average. Most kids are not like superstars. And so I really appreciated this question. Is there anything that you want to add, Lisa?
I just wanted to say that, academics isn't the only, grades, test scores isn't the only measure of a person. There are so many people who, didn't do well in school academically, but they have tremendous skills, social skills, business skills, all other kind of skills, and they do very well in life. And so I think there's so many different ways to be successful. And our goal as parents is just try to help our kids figure out which one is going to work for them. And, I think these schools can offer a great opportunity for kids to do that.
I think this is the 4th episode in a row you end it with something very profound.
Yeah, that's me. I'm a deep thinker.
I'm serious. No, but we can't emphasize this enough. So there's a family, and I'm not going to mention the name because I when I mention names, I have to clear it with the person first, even if they probably wouldn't mind. But I really appreciate this. A family here in the Atlanta area that has given a lot of money to charity. And the reason why they've given a lot of money for charity is their father made a lot of money in his business. And he had dyslexia, and he was a C student. Mm-hmm. He went to Presbyterian College in South Carolina. And one of the things that he did, he had such a strong conviction that people put so much overemphasis on grades that he literally established a scholarship, an endowed scholarship at Presbyterian for C students, because that was him.
Fantastic.
He's like, he was a C student who made multi-millions, and there's lots of you out there who can do what I did. And so let's close with that.
All right, let's do it.
Awesome. See you next week.
See you next week.
And now, this week's interview with a special guest.
Okay, friends, you're in for a treat. I'm actually doing a 3-part interview with Eric Furda. And Eric's a great guy. You're going to really enjoy this. Spent a lot of time at Columbia, over a decade, in leadership, over a decade at Penn. He's carried multiple other roles as well. I'll let him explain that. But in today's episode, we let him talk about his new book, which he wrote with Jacques Steinberg. And then the next 2 weeks, he's going to come back and answer questions about applying to selective universities. Listen and enjoy.
Friends, really, really got out of the water. Friends, really, really excited today. I am here with Eric Furda, who is currently a college counselor at one of the great schools in Pennsylvania, Penn Charter. Welcome to the Your College Bound Kid podcast, Eric.
Mark, it's great to be here, and it's been a long time, so wonderful to see you.
Yeah. In fact, it's funny how these interviews evolve. I met Eric at an admission training conference I was attending at Harvard. He was one of the instructors. We struck up a long conversation, and he was at Penn at the time, and we just got to talking, and he said, "Mark, you got to come to our campus. We're doing this big CBO fly-in." So then I saw him again a month or 2 later, and we talked for about a half an hour about coming on the podcast. Can you believe that's been 2 years now, Eric?
Absolutely amazing how time goes by, and what a couple of years, a year and a half it's been.
Well, you don't have the record. Gary Clark at UCLA, it was like 2 years and 8 months from when we started to did the interview.
Good company.
There you go. So, Eric, you've got a really interesting backstory. Take your time. We'd love to hear, anything you want to share, quite honestly. Your background, though, various admission roles you've had. Walk us all the way up to what you're doing now, just so our listeners can sort of understand your context.
Happy to do so. And, talk about time, how quickly... Gosh, 1987 was the year I graduated from the University of Pennsylvania, and I started working in the admissions office then. And don't worry, listeners, I'm not going to bring you year by year. I'll give you the 10,000 feet. And Mark, you could dive in where you like. It was interesting. It wasn't that college admissions was a
a career the way it is now. People weren't going to master's degrees and thinking about going into college admissions. And so it was different in the late 80s, but it was really fascinating because as a young person, you learned a great deal hitting the road, being in front of audiences. There was the marketing aspect, representing my own institution. I had, some deep loyalty there. So that made parts of it easier. But, the bottom line is, and I think this lesson can be for a lot of young professionals, dive into something that you're interested in and you're just going to learn a great deal because you need to get the work done. And it looked very different again back in the 1980s. But then I made my way up to New York City and worked at Columbia University in the city of New York for a number of years, almost a couple decades, I guess. And at that time period, or during that time period, I became the executive director of undergraduate admissions for Columbia College and the School of Engineering and Applied Science. And so that was an interesting run. And then, Mark, maybe, this is another piece of career advice, maybe more than college advice, is I took 4 years and I was a vice president of alumni relations at Columbia. I felt like I gave admissions everything that I had. It was all I knew. And I thought it would be interesting to serve an institution in a different capacity. And I stayed at Columbia. And I really enjoyed that role. I learned a lot about governance, which helped later on in running an alumni association, learned a great deal about working with trustees. But I missed it, right, Mark? I missed the students. Some people were observing like, gee, the time that you seem to be smiling is when people come in and say, in your former role, because you never really leave it and everyone asks you for advice, which is a lot of fun. But I did have the opportunity to come back to Philadelphia, come back to alma mater as the dean of admissions back in 2008. And up until the end of December 2020, I was in that role. And then I became the senior associate director of college counseling at the William Penn Charter School, where my children also attend. So really look to align life in some different ways, with their schedules at this point of time.
So a couple things, Eric. One, you probably don't know this, but I probably know more Eric Furda stories than you know, because Seth Berger and I are buddies, and he's always talking about playing basketball with you and various stories about you. So,
well, Seth's a great one, and young entrepreneur starting end one, and in a lot of ways too. I mean, look at what he's doing. He is basketball coach at Westtown School, the basketball coach at Westtown School. So I think in some ways we each kind of found our paths back to this type of setting.
One thing you never mentioned was your time with Common App.
Oh, absolutely. So it was really interesting because I found serving in roles on the board of directors, including the chair of the board at Common App, as well as serving on a scholarship committee for the Lenfest Foundation, serving rural Pennsylvanians. That's where you just take your expertise. And in some ways, Mark, this gets into the book a little bit later on too. And the radio show it's having this information. And as you are a perfect example of this, sharing that information across platforms. But I really learned so much more. I was in that Columbia Penn bubble, and Common App really opened my eyes. They should have been opened anyway, so shame on me. But it really did open my eyes much more to the broader membership of the Common Application. Again, governance, going back to some of my experience there, serving on a board, having a fiduciary responsibility, understanding terms of board members, understanding how you serve a membership. And those were difficult years. Those were challenging years. And it's interesting you bring up Common App. I'm actually going to see Jenny Ricard over this week. And so those were great years to work with colleagues that maybe I didn't have interaction with in the schools that I was working with before, and really learning about the type of customer service and the dependence that schools have on such products. And we find when something doesn't work, that's the problem, right? And I think we really helped work through that over the years, serving on that board for 6+ years, I believe.
Good stuff. Well, that's a good segue. Let's transition about this very exciting book you co-wrote with the author of another book I liked almost 2 decades ago, Jacques Steinberg, author of The Gatekeepers. And so the book is called The College Conversation, a practical companion for parents to guide their children along the path to higher education. So let's start with why you wrote the book and what you regard as the core message you were trying to convey in writing the book.
Definitely. And, I feel again that this goes back to we had knowledge that we've, have gained over the years, over the decades. And you think about ways that you can try to share that knowledge, democratize it in some ways, and, just basically grow the audience. And the college conversation was, Jacques and I worked together. Probably the first main introduction was when he had his blog called The Choice with the New York Times.
I love that blog.
Number one, it's easy to say blog right now. I mean, it wasn't that type of vehicle when Jacques came out with it as it is today. And certainly for the New York Times to have that type of digital content was very different for them. And so, again, I think this is an opportunity for us to all to learn about how to share the information that we have. And it was a go-to resource. If your boss said, well, how many applications did our peers receive? It's like, okay, well, let's go to the Choice blog because Jacques was collecting it. And so Jacques and I built off of that for the New York Times with some of their learning networks. And so he videoed me and used some of that content. And so I think really just had this level of trust and a rapport with each other, which years later, dove into co-writing the college conversation. And let's face it, Mark, it's about building a team, right? It's like, if you're going to co-write a book with somebody, it's like, right. I'm like, okay, I was wondering what I brought to the table. It was very clear what Jacques brought to the table. And we were able to write most of this book face to face. The final editing was virtual because of COVID.
Well, let me tell you what I loved about the book. And I'm a huge believer in college counseling. I think it's vital. I think it's really important. All types of college counseling, public school, private, boarding, day, independent educational consulting, CBO, all of it. I see value to all of it. But I feel like you wrote this book in a way where it's almost like you're shepherding or managing parents and teaching, assuming that they're probably not going to be able to pay to have an independent educational counselor, and they're probably not going to be at a place like Penn Charter and have access to someone like you. And I feel like you wrote it in a way where you're sort of guiding them on how to guide and steer their kid through the whole process and avoid some of the big landmines and pitfalls and give them some real sage advice. Does that sound like what you were hoping to accomplish? Because I think it's the best book on the market at doing that. And I don't say things I don't believe. I've told Dr. Lisa Ruff, who's a colleague of mine, and many others the same thing.
I appreciate that. We appreciate that. That was the purpose. And Jacques was always good, particularly if I was getting jargony and like too into the professional, language. And he'd say, okay, Eric, let's write that down. However, let's think of our audience.
Yeah, so important.
And also assume no knowledge. And so I'm okay when career college counselors pick up the book and say, well, of course, I get it. I've been doing this work. And hopefully it could help them with some of the families, that they're working with. But it really is that book for somebody to pick up that really doesn't have that foundational knowledge. And hopefully this is bringing them through with a piece or two. I think everyone will always say this. If you come away with one thing, hopefully there's something here that's going to help you. And that is the spirit of the book. And that's how we framed it. If I may, around 5 conversations that families can have with their children, people supporting a young person. It could be a CBO director picking this up, an adult in a young person's life. And so we framed this around, and we could dive into this as much as you like. But again,
that was my next segue. I wanted to ask if you would dive right into the structure of the book, the 5 conversations, and give us maybe a little tidbit of advice in each of those different conversations, because I love how you sort of do it chronologically from sort of start all the way through the transition to college.
Absolutely. So the 5 conversations are self-discovery, search, application, decisions being made by families and by the colleges and universities. And then, as you said, transition, making that transition in. And Jacques was really good about making sure we went through that first year of college, which could also touch on the transfer conversation, if that's a conversation that needs to take place. So the self-discovery part is really that inward-looking piece. And so we frame this around identity, interests, ideas, intellect, and inspiration. Basically words that They begin with the letter I, obviously, because it's about the young person. It's about that individual, that another I. It's about that individual. And so whenever we share this information, you can see people maybe glossing over a little bit, but then you may say, okay, well, think about this at the application stage when you're talking about yourself through essays, in an interview, however you're representing yourself by asking individuals to write letters of recommendation for you. So these I's aren't just like this self-reflection for its own purpose. They're going to serve you in subsequent conversations. And then as you're looking at colleges, and, Mark, this is where many individuals are, as they're taking a look at schools. I would be in the Penn admissions office back when I was there, and families will say, this is our 9th visit this week. We're exhausted. We have 3 more. I'm like, okay. So I'd rather see families on a Monday if I can, more so than a Thursday or a Friday. But I'll say to them, I'm like, okay, thinking about the schools that you're going to visit and maybe doing some reflection on those that you already visited. This is where you need to think about, well, what's the culture of the institution? What was being said that may be grounded in the founding or mission of that institution, and how is it relevant today? So culture, curriculum. Mark, if I spend time and bring value, hopefully, to the families at Penn Charter or anywhere else, I really ask them to become critical researchers as they look at the curriculum. What's the shape of the curriculum? What's the purpose of the curriculum? Here's the 4 years, and how is it structured? And then you get into community, which is basically the third C, which is basically the intersection of people and physical spaces and programs. That could be, we admitted a class, and how are they going to interact with each other through the spaces on our campus? Maybe through the curriculum, a first-year seminar. Maybe there's some signature housing programs that are going to bring students together around, shared interests that they have. So what's the chemistry there, and how does that play out? Conclusions is about outcomes, which quite often can be, graduation rates, 4, 5, 6 years. It could be graduate school maybe on the horizon and thinking about the opportunities with graduate school. And then the 5th C is cost, affordability. And so lining all of these up, I mean, if you can right now for the listeners and those that'll be watching this on YouTube is, I just visited these 10 schools. Okay, put them in alphabetical order. Don't try to stack the deck at all by putting that first school on the list that you feel is your first choice. And then, we have about a dozen exercises through this book. Jacques and I put together exercises where we would have put together a spreadsheet, Google Doc, legal pad, whatever works for you. It has to work for you. Otherwise, what's the purpose of it?
Right.
And you'll list the schools. You'll put the 5 Cs across, one axis, the schools along another axis, and literally start filling it in. And then later on, as you get through some of these other stages like application and decision, you're going to go back to these notes, and hopefully they'll remain relevant to your search and will help you with the rest of the search.
Yeah, I love the exercises too. That's another thing I loved about the book. First, the one criticism I had is why is it not the 5 Cs with cost? But you kept constantly bringing cost in and saying it's the 5th C, throughout the whole book. And so at the end, I felt good about that, because I think there was plenty of attention about cost and about money and about thinking through this process from the financial angle. So I was happy. I want to go back to curriculum because I think that's really important. So how do you recommend a student compare curriculum of one school to another? Is it just a simple matter of looking at the requirements for a degree they're interested in and pulling out the course catalog? Is there anything else besides that you'd recommend they do?
Well, I absolutely love it because, Mark, if we could still have course catalogs, that my table here would be like stacked with them. I mean, I still like going to paper where, when that's a resource that's available.
I got to get that word out of my vocabulary. It's online now.
I love it. I love it because in a lot of ways that is what you're doing. And I do remember sitting in upstate New York back when I was about to become a student at the University of Pennsylvania, and I had no idea. And I was like literally choosing courses. Of course, I was going to go see an academic advisor when I arrived on campus, but we weren't going to have a Zoom or or other type of conversation, in that month of August, which, can take place now for course planning. Okay, so here's the rudimentary way, or different levels. The first is the admissions office is going to have something to say about the curriculum at their school. And that's going to be, try to give you some loose framework about what you're trying to achieve through the curriculum. And of course, it could become different too, because you could be looking at a school that has an engineering school, a nursing school, arts and sciences, communication. It's not one size fits all. So that might be the first level that you're going to learn from the admissions lens. And that is, wow, there's a lot of schools at this university, and there's going to be some thread through them, perhaps, or is there, is a good question. And what does that look like? I think the second way, and you hear this from students all the time, whether they're not sure what it is that they want to study. So you want to show them how in the curriculum they're going to have general education requirements. Again, I don't want to be too jargony, but courses that maybe students have some choice with, but there's going to be a framework because the faculty really feel that they should be exposed to different modes of thinking. And you'll see that a great deal. And I could give you some examples of this. I think that next step is actually going to the College of Arts and Sciences website and off the admissions website and look at, just what I was mentioning. Usually you'll see a pie chart. And that pie chart will be a third of your courses are going to be in this general education realm, unless it's a completely open curriculum.
Right.
A third of your courses are going to have some latitude and free choice, maybe called free electives. And the other third is going to be kind of that depth area, whether it's called a major, a minor, a concentration, whatever it is. And so you'll have that. And then you could start digging into the curriculum a little bit more around areas that you're interested in, perhaps at first. But then also a student may say, well, gee, I'm really interested in the field of economics. Great. Go to the economics website now and dive into that and see the different levels that you can, the different branches, I should say, that you can run off of. And of course, you'll hear the words interdisciplinary and cross-disciplinary. Now, here's the advanced level of doing it. Okay, Mark?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we want the advanced.
The advanced level of doing this, and I don't think you can necessarily skip steps to get there. And even in this digital age, this is where you're going to be in, let's say, in the engineering school, on their website, in the bioengineering department, and there's going to be a link there for current students. So there's the stress. That's what I want to stress. There's going to be a link there for current students based on when they matriculated for the class of 2024. Here are the graduation requirements, preceding classes and classes that may come later. And although it'll be a digital form, it'll probably be a PDF. And if you print it out, it's going to look like one of the most basic worksheets that you and I printed out 20 to 30 years ago. And it's going to have boxes. It's going to say, okay, well, what are the general courses you need to take? What are the math, because we're talking about engineering now, what are the math and science requirements? Where will students interact with the liberal arts and have some of those types of electives? And here's the bioengineering major. And these are the courses you must take, and this is where you're going to get some choice. And they're literally, it's like that graduation worksheet that you need to check those boxes off. Obviously, you don't want this just to be a process of just checking boxes, but sitting on a departmental website is probably some type of sheet that's going to clearly have on one page, most likely, what you will need to take in order to graduate.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the advanced level of this.
Yeah, and then you can go read the descriptions if you want. You can rate my professors, and if you want, and you can really go micro and see what students think about the professors that, at the various institutions. That's one exercise I like to give my students. And I know a lot of professors don't necessarily like that website because they say some snotty-nosed kid I gave a C to, and now he's ripping me.
Well, a science faculty member once said to me, he's like, there's a direct correlation between the number of A's given and the ratings on them. So the science teachers are like, of course they didn't like it. I gave them a C.
I know that they feel that way, but I'm going to tell you, I know both my daughters, they're 25 and 22. Oldest graduated from Davidson. The second one graduated from UGA and just started at North Carolina State in a master's program. They never one time felt like Rate My Professors was off. Like not one time for 4 years. Now you want to have a decent number of reviews, not 3 reviews or something, but If it said that the professor was completely engaging and interactive, that's what they were. And so I'm not trying to promise it's gospel, but and with my students as well, I've found that to be a very accurate level. I mean, you want to be careful with the word accurate, but well worth checking to the point where I strongly recommend students utilize it. And current students, I recommend you utilize it too, because we often know the professor makes a class.
Absolutely. And, it's interesting too, as we're talking about curriculum cutting over into community, here you have in your household, Davidson College experience and the UGA experience, which in some ways are going to be defined by their size and location. But let's focus on, just kind of the undergraduate enrollment. It is, and getting into those nuances. I think, Mark, one of the pieces that strikes me in this newer role, being on the college counseling side is, and I think the college conversation can help with this as well, is what really are the priorities? When are you being your truest self about what it is that you want? Because I'm at the stage right now with many students where their lists are just getting longer and longer because they feel like, I have to think of this, I have to think of that. And that's fine right now. There'll be a narrowing process, while probably what's most important to them is right in front of them. And then what are the outliers? I'm okay, and I'm just learning this role, if the vast majority of your schools look and feel a certain way, but there is a place that's the outlier, geographically, size, because there's something else that's resonating that you really discovered. And so, but also, I just want families to keep in front of them and students to keep in front of them what their true priorities are. And actually, that is the first exercise in the college conversation, is taking out an index card and writing down 5 words or 5 sentences, whatever works for you, that describes the college environment, the college experience that you're looking for. And that can change. While this may be the grounding piece for you, going back to that card to say, well, does that still matter to me? Is it still a priority? And if not, why? What has changed about me? What has changed about my criteria?
No, great. Another thing I love about the book is quite comprehensive. Like, it does cover a lot of topics you thought of. I love that you have that transfer section in there. Even that it's short, you have a little gap year section in there. Let me ask you about that. Obviously, gap years have been somewhat on the rise ever since Melania Obama took a gap year. And then, of course, with COVID, certain schools saw a spike. I get more questions about it now than I used to get. What's your advice to a family thinking about taking a gap year and asking those questions? What would be your advice coming from your perspective?
Well, there's enough research that speaks to, the development of a young person's brain, just their maturity level, maybe just being a little burned out by being a student their whole lives, that there is benefit when possible for a student to take some time before they enroll in college. And you see this in other systems of education, probably most so in the United Kingdom, just given some of the interests that the students have and kind of the timeline and rhythm for education there. It's not for everybody, and there is an expense associated with it. Although in the book we do speak about Global Citizen Year, and that's a group of individuals that I've had the opportunity to interact with, and really am supportive of them supporting families and meeting financial need. Of course, a lot of these experiences needed to go online over this last year, but many are reopening. So I think when possible, a gap year should be an option to consider, while going to the 5th C cost and maybe some opportunity costs that are there. I think it is a real personal decision. I don't think all of a sudden we're going to see half of our classes taking a gap year. Now, this may also bring up something a little more developmental, and that is, and not necessarily saying go for a postgraduate year, a PG year, which is different than a gap year, is, how old is your child? What is their birth date? And where are they in their class? And, there are some individuals who are younger in their class and could benefit, again, from another year before they enter a college. And so there are other pieces there that may mean that the beginning of college is literally, quote unquote, kind of deferred for a period of time. And many families, as you stated, were making these decisions around COVID as well.
Yeah, Eric. So when you think about the book, is there any advice you have on how to approach reading it? Like, do you think, well, everybody sort of just reads it the way they read it, or if do you have any thoughts on that? Any as to how to approach the book from a structural standpoint?
Yeah, Jacques and I have spoken about this a great deal, and we just put some of the final edits on the paperback version that's coming out in September. Without a heavy lift, it was more a little bit around the introduction than anything else. And I think if you're a sophomore, junior in high school, then you may pretty much pick it up from the start and dive into it. But then you may pause because you're not yet up to filling out the application or making that decision. For some families, Common Application goes live on August the 1st, and it may be, I'm a rising senior, I'm going to go right to the application section and maybe work my way backwards, because you're going to really have to, because as with any book, you're going to see that it's referencing points made earlier in the book. But
right.
the book was written in a way that you could pick it up and at least initially go to where you are at that moment and then either work your way forward or backwards.
Yeah, no, this is great. And I know we have multiple listeners out there, I'm sure, who are saying, I'm sold. I like what I hear. Where do you recommend they get the book? And can you also talk about the various formats that it's offered in?
Certainly. And so what I really enjoyed doing, and I know Jacques enjoyed this as well, is separately, because this was during COVID, we put together the Audible version of the book. And so I was in a sound studio here in Philadelphia, and he was in the area that he's in outside of New York. And so the Audible version, I think, could be a good one for those that are finding themselves in a car again and maybe in more traffic.
Yeah.
And going in that way. The hardcover came out last September, and the paperback is coming out now in September of 2021. I'm excited to hold that paperback.
Don't forget the Kindle, because that's what I have.
and Kindle as well. I'm kind of bringing myself across the Viking Penguin website right now, thinking, okay, where else? Because to make sure my editors are happy. But they've been great. I mean, basically, individuals that we've worked with who have obviously worked in the space for a long time and supported the idea of the gatekeepers back when that came out, is they just want to make sure that we're meeting families where they are as much as possible. And so we also enjoyed, having conversations like this, because we feel that's helpful in and of itself.
Well, Eric, this has been fantastic. Thanks a bunch for coming on the podcast. And the great news, listeners, is Eric is back next week to tackle some questions about selective admissions. So really appreciate this, Eric. This has been great.
Thank you so much, Mark.
Let's take a break to learn about Mark's recommended resource for the week.
Friends, I am so excited to share with you the recommended resource for episode 187. I've been chomping at the bit like a kid in a candy store. So friends, my favorite thing to share with you are tips and methods of getting beyond the marketing of the college to really get to the core, the essence of what the college is actually like. That's why we had an interview with Carmen Chavez from Florida, talking about how she got into the classrooms and was able to experience what Duke was like as somebody sitting in the classrooms, and how she used an online method to do that. That's why we had Julia Hutchison also come on and talk about how she was able to use online resources to get a sense of how the cultures were different at the schools. Julia being from Wisconsin. And we've got a few more interviews like that scheduled, actually with a couple of our parents coming up. And you also know that one thing that I have really enjoyed doing is visiting colleges, and talking to 20 students is always my goal, and asking them direct questions and coming away with the pulse from the school. Well, a recommended resource this week is a poll that Niche does. Niche polls actually over 500,000 students, more than anyone else. And they've got a couple of very interesting questions on there that I think you'll find fascinating. And so they ask students what one word describes your college. And you have all of that at your disposal. That would be like me visiting each college and asking 30, 40, 50 students what one word describes your college. I think you'd find that interesting. And so that's the recommended resource. And I'm going to just share with you what the results were for our last 4 college spotlights, just to get a sense. So our most recent college spotlight, College of Charleston, the 3 most, and this one had 89 responses, so that's a lot. The 3 most common responses: number 1, friendly for the most part. Number 2, motivated. Number 3, in search of something. The spotlight before that was Lehigh. The number 1 answer to this question, now they only had 39 respondents, so less, but still a good number. Number 1 response, work hard, play hard. Number 2 response, play hard, work hard. Number 3 response, Greek obsessed and work hard, play hard. So you clearly see the Greek element coming out in the school there. Then let's go back to our next spotlight before that, which was Barnard College. So Barnard had 29 responses. Number 1 answer, determined. Number 2 answer, unafraid. Number 3 answer, ambitious. And we'll go back one more college spotlight for you to see the most common responses. And this is Babson College. That would be 4 spotlights ago. And if you listen to that, you know that Babson, according to several rankings, has been ranked the number 1 school for entrepreneurship, in one case for over 25 years in a row. So this may not surprise you. Mind you, there are only 12 responses, but number 1, entrepreneurial, actually tied for number 1, willing to do whatever it takes. And then the number 3 response, ambitious. So obviously I want you to put a little bit more credibility in this when the survey size gets a little bigger, but it's a great way for you to know what the students think about a school. And there's also some other good poll questions I have as well. So it's just niche.com, which we've had before as a resource, but I specifically want you to go back and look at their polls, and particularly this question: what one word or phrase best describes a typical student at this school?
And now, this week's interview with a special guest.
Kristen Mosley, welcome back.
Glad to be back.
So friends, you may not realize this. You may say, what do you mean back? She was just hit with us last week. So the interview you heard actually with Kristen, I recorded that about 6 to 8 months ago. So Kristen, had you just finished your first semester at Spelman when we did that? I think you were between semester 1 and 2.
Yes. So now I'm completely done with my first year, and now I'm a sophomore on campus.
Right. So we ran that interview, and I kind of kept it in the bank for a while for the right time to go live with it. And we got a really good response. And I just was curious one day, and I said, let me reach out to Kristen, because I know she's still working on scholarships while she's at Spelman. It'd be pretty cool to talk to her to see how well that's going. So I reached out to her, and I'm not going to tell you now what she said. We'll get into that in a second, but that's what we're going to talk. That's what we're going to talk about today. Sound good?
Sounds good.
So before we do, one thing that's pretty cool, this often happens to me, Kristen. I do an interview, and then afterward, I'm kicking myself because there's that one question I never thought of. And the nice thing with this is I get a do-over. I get a chance to ask you the question that I thought of afterward that I never asked. So I like that too. So my question is this. You may remember, I asked you before if you would have had like a 2.8 instead of a 3.88 GPA, do you think that would have, reduced the number of scholarships? And you said, in some cases, yes, but there were still lots of other ones that were out there that you didn't have to be a high achiever. So my question I also wanted to ask to you is, what about family income? Like, how many of the scholarships you looked at were open to what I call a highly resourced family versus targeting an under-resourced family? And what can you share about that?
To be honest, I felt like a lot of the ones that I saw were open to a lot of people. There were very few that I came across. I did come across some, but there were very few that I came across that I was not eligible for because of my family's income. So, it is a consideration when applying for scholarships, but it's not one of the biggest ones that I had issues with. I think it's really just about finding what works for you. And so some of those didn't work, but they weren't majority of the ones that I saw. I felt like the smaller ones, or the ones that were in that bracket, they were a lot of the bigger amounts, but yeah, those weren't majority that I saw. So I guess it sort of worked out.
So, in other words, if someone, comes from a comfortable family income, they should not be deterred away from pursuing outside scholarships and thinking, oh, the only people that going to get them are going to be like the Pell Grant recipients or whatever. That was not your experience.
No, not at all, because I found out that I wasn't Pell Grant eligible, um, and I was still able to apply for all of these scholarships. So, like I said, just going and finding the ones that cater towards who you are, where you come from, and what you want to do.
Awesome. Thanks for that. All right. Now let's transition. So I want you to tell me, I'll just ask you again on the air, the same question that I asked you last week on the phone, which was, how is your search for scholarships going while at Spelman? Actually, let's introduce a little suspense here. So before you share what I know you want to share, did you start the process of applying for a lot of scholarships as a student at Spelman, or was that like cut short right away? I mean, talk to me about that.
After I found out about, or during which part of my Spelman experience?
Yeah. So, well, you know what? I think we're dancing around something. Let's just get it out there, and then everybody will know what we're talking about, and then my question might make more sense. So, why don't you share with our listeners your update? What did you say to me when I said, Kristen, last time I talked to you, you'd done amazingly well. You got around 10 scholarships while in high school, but you were experiencing maybe a bit of frustration trying to get them at Spelman because a lot of the ones you were looking at were targeted to high school students, but you knew they were out there and you were determined to find them. So give us an update. How's it going?
Well, last semester, I found out that my entire college, so all of my tuition fees, room, board, all of that was paid for because I got a scholarship from Spelman. So let's just say for the next 3 years, I am pretty good.
Pretty good. I would say amazing.
I'm okay. Yes, that's a better word. Phenomenal.
Yes, that's even better. So, and I have to give you all the credit in the world because it was your goal from the time we started talking. I want to go where I want to go, which was Spelman. And I know that I'm going to have to go get scholarships, but I'm going to make it happen. And I want to get a full ride.
Hmm.
And you didn't get it on the front end. You got these 10 individual ones, but here you are. I don't know if you remember me mentioning this in the interview, but I know Spelman in the past has given scholarships to current students who are doing very well.
Afterwards,
I've had that
yes.
experience with other students. So tell me, what was that like? Like, how did you find out? Did somebody call you? Did you log into a portal? Like, how did you find out that you had a complete full ride covering not just tuition, but student fees? Does it extend to room and board as well?
Yes, all of it.
Everything. Complete cost of attendance scholarship.
Everything.
How did you find this out?
Well, it wasn't on purpose. I was applying for another scholarship when I needed to pull up my financial aid information for this upcoming school year. And when I looked at my portal, I said, oh, I see some money here. And I'm like, I wasn't notified, so I wasn't sure like if it was legit or maybe it was something wrong on their side where I needed to ensure that this was correct. So I gave one of the financial advisors a call and she was saying, no, that's your scholarship for the next 3 years. So just very thankful that this has happened because as you said, like Spelman has been the dream for a while now. So to see that come to fruition with this scholarship money has definitely been amazing.
I mean, listen, you're doing causes do something we've never done, which is, my last interview with you. I put you on the hot seat. I did everything. That means it was over. And now we're bringing you back. So, something had to be incredible. So, question, what did your mom and dad say when you told them? What was that like?
Oh, my dad, oh my goodness. Everywhere he goes, $44,000. He has to tell any and everybody that I got a scholarship just because he's so proud and so happy that he doesn't have to pay for it. That they don't have to pay for it. So they were ecstatic that this happened. And
I think you should say they are, not were. I'm sure it's present tense.
Oh, yes. They still are, yes, because there are 2 more years to go after this. So
Okay, so this is very rare because, a lot of times schools give their money on the front end, and once you're in, they're working and using that money to go court somebody new. And so, have you been able to do any digging to find out how you got this? Because even when most of the time somebody gets a scholarship, if it's from the institution, there's some kind of application process, especially for the big ones, cost of attendance, interviews, there's everything like that. And have you been able to discern if this came from Spelman or if an anonymous donor reached out to someone at Spelman and said, I really like this Kristen Mosley. I'm going to cover her cost of attendance, and I'll just give the money directly to you, and I want to be anonymous.
So unfortunately, I haven't found all of that information out. I was able to talk to an advisor earlier in the school year or last semester and sort of see if she knew where it came from. She was told that someone was supposed to post it on my account, and haven't really been able to reach back out just because they're so busy with the freshmen and making sure that everyone who's already here on campus, their financials are paid for. So I haven't been able to reach back out to them and speak with them, but that's definitely something that I'm looking forward to doing.
So listen, I learn things every day, but this is my 22nd year doing this. I've never seen a situation like yours where it wasn't an anonymous donor on the outside. They reached out, somebody who was very impressed with you and said, I want to take care of this person, but I don't want any fanfare. That's the only time I've ever seen this happen. And that's what I think happened. Because normally when it's from the institution like that, one, if it's a full cost of attendance scholarship, it's a big deal and it's competitive. And so there's some kind of application process. Also, there's more of a notification process too. Like the way you found out, it might have been in your account for a couple of weeks or something, right? And you just found out when you logged in.
True.
So if an institution does that, there's usually a lot more fanfare. You wouldn't just haphazardly, willy-nilly find out like that. So in my experience, I have seen this happen before, but it's only been when some well-resourced philanthropic person, like a Mackenzie Scott, or just could be somebody local in Atlanta, it could be anybody, got word of you and said, I want to cover this young lady. But I don't want, my name and bells and lights in an article or anything like that. I want to be anonymous. So I feel pretty strongly that that's what I think happened, because that's the only time I've ever seen. Who cares? It's money. Either way, you're good.
Right. Well, whoever it was, I appreciate you. Thank you, or whoever or whatever it was that made this happen.
This is so amazing. Because weren't you considering staying at home too, also just to save on the room and board?
For the past semester, yes. This upcoming semester, I was planning on staying on campus, just not in the dorm that I'm staying. I'm staying in one of the most expensive rooms on
I took care
campus.
of you you get to go with style too.
Yes,
They're like, put her in the best dorm.
precisely. So I would be staying in a room that wasn't as nice, or a place that wasn't as nice as the one that I'm staying in now. But I mean, it all would have worked out because I would still be on campus and most of my tuition and room and board would be paid for, just not all of it to the extent that this is made possible.
So, Kristen, I am curious. Like, do you feel like curiosity is killing me? Like, I've got to find out more. Like, I want to know who this came from. So I'm going to try to do a little bit of digging. Or do you feel like just leave it alone and let it go? Like, what are your thoughts?
I think it's a little bit of balance of both. I feel like they sort of kept it anonymous, maybe for a reason, if that's the case. But then I also just want to have the opportunity to sort of thank them for making this happen for me. So if given the opportunity and if they tell me that information, then I guess I'll find out.
Yeah, one way of approaching that would be to reach out and say, I would love to be able to thank whoever was responsible for this. Is there like a contact person or somebody that, that I can thank? And that I think will lead to either no, a person, it's just anonymous. I also think you can just ask just explicitly, like, did this come from Spellman's institutional money
or did this come from somebody outside who made a contribution? Um, I don't know whether they would say to you, we're not allowed to say that, but my sense is that they probably would at least say that, but then not tell you who it's from, even if it was anonymous. But, I mean, I've only seen this happen less than 5 times in my 22 years where somebody got a full cost of attendance unbeknownst to them. But like I said, every single time it was from the outside. So I'm curious. So if you find out more, get back to me. And then for your current scholarships, like you had applied to some more when you were at Spelman. How's all that playing out? Did you win any more?
Yes, I applied to a few. One of them I found out about 4 weeks ago. So this is before I found out about the scholarship from Spelman. I received a email or something in the mail the past 4 weeks ago, and I found out that I received a scholarship that actually comes straight to my pocket. So I don't have to worry about Spelman taking away money from that one. So I was just glad that I applied to it and glad that it worked out.
Yeah, so a lot of times with or with outside scholarships, they will go directly to the school, and it's very common for schools to have language in there that says if you get an outside scholarship, you need to direct it to us. But if none of those parameters are met, then you're free. If they're not asking it, and if the a lot of times, sometimes, I don't say a lot of times, but sometimes outside scholarships like to go directly to the person because they don't want the institution to reduce the amount that they're going to give, because they're like, we're doing this to give it to you, Kristen, not for Spelman to not take $2,000 less, and give it to you. And our money is basically a wash. How much was that one for that you won, Kristen?
I think that one was either 1,000 or 1,500. It was from the Mensa Foundation.
And how did you find out about it?
I think I was on one of those websites that you gave me. I can't remember which one specifically. It may have been a blog, JVL Counseling. It may have been that one.
Yeah, JPL is a good blog. They have some good ones on there. It's been one of the top ones that I've seen people win scholarships on, because they pre-screen them to make sure there's no scams and everything in there.
Well, it worked out.
So, Kristen, when is your book coming out? When is your How to Win Scholarships, How I Won a Full Ride book? That's people write those books and then they get asked to speak, and then the next thing you know, you're on the circuit. So when is all this going to happen? Have you thought about it?
We'll see. I'm trying to still sort of figure out how I want all of these. But yeah, right now it's just sort of taking it all in, enjoying college life, and then maybe mentoring people along the way if that opportunity becomes available.
Well, I don't know if you realize this, but your interview here is a form of mentoring. I talked to a college counselor last week who said she was taking notes from all the things that you did, and she's implementing them with her students. So how cool is that?
Oh, I'm glad.
Yeah. So you're already not just mentoring students, mentoring college counselors who are learning from what you did. So how does this work? Like, of course, you had a 4-year renewable scholarship, one of yours. So does Spelman reduce their or do they reduce their contribution, or are they taking that money and the donor just makes the difference, like we call last dollar versus first dollar scholarships? Do you know how that works?
Yes, so they applied my Zelle last week. And so that sort of reduced the amount of money that they were giving me. Now, I'm not sure how that works for my outside scholarships. I have to check in with my financial advisor to see, because I do need to ensure that I get that money from the high school on my account as well. But as of right now, I'm thinking that they may be reducing the amount of scholarship that I received from the school.
That's most likely. And you may not realize this, but when you said Zelle, probably like 3% of people knew what you're talking about, because most of our listeners are not in Georgia. So for those of you who are wondering, what the heck is Zelle? We have something in Georgia called the Zelle Miller Scholarship, named after a former governor, where the highest achievers in high school get a significant amount of money, especially if they go to a public Georgia school. They pretty much get their tuition, 100% of the tuition covered if they go to Georgia public school. And if they go to Georgia private school, which Spelman's is private school, they get around $4,000 approximately. to reduce the costs for doing so well. You have to have good standardized testing as well as a really high GPA in academic courses in high school. So that's what she was talking about, is a scholarship that comes from the state, a merit-based scholarship from the state of Georgia for high achieving performance in high school. So there you go. So I do have a question, Kirsten. Do you find that this is something that you almost keep a little close to the vest because if you tell too many people, they're going to be jealous? Or do you find that you just celebrate your news and just share it and it is what it is? If you're going to hate on me, that's your problem.
I definitely celebrate it with my friends, the people that I know. They sort of went through that, is this really a scholarship, legitimate phase with me? So those people sort of know. Everyone else, I'm not sure if they know, but from the people within my circle, all of them know that this has happened.
Good for you. Listen, I just had to have you come on here and celebrate your news. Congratulations. And, I'm going to stay in touch with you, but sometime I have no plans of stopping this podcast. So sometime when you're maybe like around 30 or something, I'm going to say, Kristen, you got to come back on here and share what you're doing with your life, but we'll table that for like 10 years.
Sounds good.
Best of success and stay positive and keep up all the good work. And I think what people need to take away from this is hard work pays off. It also pays off to have a good reputation, because you don't get this without impressing somebody. You just happen to impress the right person. Good for you. You must say there is a God in heaven.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Awesome. Congrats, Kristen. Take care.
Thank you.
Next week in the news, driven away by hate, why HBCUs are getting so many applications. An article by Greta Anderson of Inside Higher Ed. Our question from a listener is, can you discuss the emotional side of kids leaving for college? Our interview is again with Eric Furda, the former Executive Director of Undergraduate Admissions at Columbia University and the former Dean of Undergraduate Admissions at the University of Pennsylvania. And this will be the first of 2 weeks of Eric answering your questions on how to apply to selective colleges. And our interview comes to you from the city of brotherly love, Philadelphia, and it is Temple University.
Dave, when I first got to Philly, 1995, at the time I was in Christian ministry, and I was part of launching a church. And I was going around in our subdivision, knocking on everybody's door, trying to introduce myself. I was getting all these cold stares, all these reactions, and then I got a call from, we were living in an apartment at the time, Upsall Garden Apartments in Westmount area for you Philly people. And I got a call from the front desk, and they said, 6 people have complained about you. Cut it out. And one time I was down a laundromat, and this guy's, I was trying to talk to him, and I'm coming in with my Dallas friendliness because I'd just been in Dallas, Texas for 7.5 years. And the guy's basically like, back off, man, And then I said, what happened to the city of brotherly love? And someone said, you mean the city of brotherly shove? So I got a rude awakening that I love Philly, but city of brotherly love, it doesn't quite have its southern, genteel Dallas, Texas charm about it.
Yes, it's also known as the city where the football fans will throw snowballs at Santa Claus if he happens to be rooting for the wrong team.
I just thought about it. Eric's going to listen to this. Like, come on, man, back off my city. Eric's a lifelong heart and loves the city of Philly. He's a great guy. So last question, is it worth me sweating like a groundhog being under these blankets? Did I get better sound?
Well, I can't attribute to the sound, but I can contribute that it's not going to work for YouTube.
No, I know that. I already had that thought. This is not a YouTube solution, is it?
It's not. It's a little freaky, It's like, it's a little like Freddy of Halloween there. I'm looking at you and I'm seeing it just speaks of some guy hiding under a blanket.
All right, my friend. I know you're getting ready to go off to Yale. When do you leave for Yale? Taking Laura back.
Next week, boy, it's as we talked about, I got to listen to this one, the emotional side of kids leaving for college. And I tell you, that with Lauren, it's like leaving all over again. We've just loved having her so much this last year. She's been such a treasure. And now we have to learn how to log onto our own computers and figure out how to download PDFs all on our own. So we have turned into classic progressive parents, and I'm losing my dear daughter. But on another note, what I figured is I looked at the calendar and figured it out that we're dropping her off in beginning of September. Parents' Day is the first week of October. She comes back for Thanksgiving, and she's back for Christmas. So I said, this is not like you're gone for a whole year. It's just that you're going for a series of 4 to 5 week summer camps, and that makes it much easier.
There you go. There you go. Safe travels as you get ready to go to New Haven, my friend.
Awesome. You too, my friend. So, okay, you can get out of bed now.
Yeah, I can stop sweating.
Because you know your wife is saying, is he still in bed?
Well, the test is pneumonia because he's so brutally honest with me about the sound quality. So I want to see if I pass the pneumonia test. He'll be able to talk to me about my frequencies and everything. For some good audio, man, I'll put up with some things as long as it's not on YouTube.
Awesome.
And that's our show. A big thank you to you, our listeners, for tuning in this week. If you find this podcast helpful, please subscribe so you get every episode as soon as it is released. If you are interested, there are a few ways you can really support our podcast. You can click the share button and send it to your friends and acquaintances. You can help us pay our staff and our expenses by donating on our website. And you can write a review for us on your favorite podcast listening app. I am the producer of the Your College Bound Kid podcast. We have a fantastic team of 9 people. Shout out to our co-host, Dr. David Williams and Dr. Lisa Ruff. Our sound engineer who fixes all of our many errors is Nemanja Modfitch. The amazing music you hear is from Victor Allen Weeks. Marketing designs are from Kimberly Blass. Our image editor is Talha Khan. Joy Stucker does our website episode updates. And our webmaster is Dalianas Dimitri. If you want to have a college coaching session with me, just text me at 404-664-4340. If you have a question you want to ask, or a college you want Lisa or me to do a spotlight on, or if you have a recommended resource or an article you think we should share, just send it to questions@yourcollegeboundkid.com. By the way, check out our website, where you'll find lots of content that is not on any podcast app. Our website is yourcollegeboundkid.com. We think of you as our listening family, and we look forward to meeting again with you, our family, next week.